This is the Brandon Smith Show, and I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and the entire purpose of the show is one singular thing, and that is to help you live a life that much more free from dysfunction. So today, our topic, I think, ties in this nicely. I think it's all of our topics do. We're going to be talking about habits, and in particular, the difference and importance of a habit versus a goal. So to help us on this journey, now, Travis, I've got you with this. Now, we have not talked about, I'm going to introduce you formally in a minute. I've not actually said I was going to do this to you. But Travis is, I think, the guru of habits in the world.
In the world.
I'm giving you that title. The habit guru, folks. We have the habit guru here on the show today.
I'm just too bashful to publish a book on it. So I'll let other people take that space for the time being. But thanks for acknowledging it.
Gurus can be humble. I love that. So our guest today is Travis Dommert. And Travis, I want to make sure I get your title right because it's a really cool title, in addition to Habit Guru. Senior Vice President of Talent Development for Jackson Healthcare. And I know this is a fairly new role. You moved into this. You were a president of one of the companies, operating companies.
Right.
Now you've moved into this role where you get to kind of oversee the development of all those cool, awesome leaders at Jackson, which I know is a super cool role. So before we jump into our topic today of habits, I love story time. So talk to us a little bit about kind of what you're up to today and what got you on this journey. Because you and I have been kind of walking together for many years, and you've done a lot of different things. They all seem to kind of point in this one general direction, which I think the role you're in now is just even truer to that. So tell us more about this story.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Brandon. Going back a few years, a lot of years, I would say, the formative direction I had going into my professional life was twofold. And one was to figure out, how do you make the most money? And two, how do you run a company? So you got to get in charge if you want to make the most money. And it was a very materialistic pursuit. And I think it was what I understood from being young and naive and sort of seeing my dad as this sort of idealistic person who is a successful small business owner. And I just thought that's what you do. Now, I just didn't know what it was going to be in, so I had no idea what field. And when I went to college, I actually thought, okay, well, let's pick business because I'm going to need to know that. And that year, this was 1989, Northwestern had just hit the top of the rankings in the Business Week best business schools. So I reached out to Northwestern and said, okay, I'd like to come to school there. And they said, where did you go to undergrad? Because back then you actually called. There was no internet, so I called them.
I wonder if kids today know what this means. This, by the way,
you put your
for those
thumb
listening,
in your pinky.
This is where you're making your phone with your hand.
And your arm is the cord.
Out, arms to cord, thumbs out, you stick it up to your head. It's like, I bet they don't even know what that means.
Well, anyway, at that time, I didn't know what undergrad meant. They said, where did you do your undergrad? And I didn't know what that meant. And so that we've ultimately realized I had not gone to college yet, and their business program was a graduate program. So anyway, they said, I think we ought to talk to the undergraduate office. And at Northwestern, there's no undergraduate business program. Kellogg is just for the MBA program. And so I kind of just picked the next thing I thought would be hard and made money, and that was engineering. And so it's so funny. I went through a whole engineering program only to realize I don't think that's it. And so a couple of years after working in a pretty wild ride IT startup, I went to business school, and that's where our connection was through Emory. Had a great experience, but came out still really not clear what it is I want to do. So it was just, okay, who pays the most? What has the biggest return? And again, it was kind of high flying startups. But I think it was a few years after business school, there's a big realization, and that was two things. One, I think I'm going to end up working longer than like 5 years before I retire. This isn't just going to be like a quick hit. You sell or flip some big company and then you go retire. And two, if you're going to work that hard and you're going to work a lot and for a long time, you need to figure out what you actually like to do. And the big discovery for me after business school was that people kind of power everything. Every business is just a group of people. And I turned out to be kind of passionate about people. And I thought it was so interesting. I realized, wow, I shouldn't have done engineering figuring out how machines work. I should have done psychology and figured out how do people work. And so ever since then, it's been trying to figure out, okay, how do I get more connected to developing people? And that's even when I came into Jackson Healthcare. Great company, amazing culture, growing. Initially, I was drawn to leadership. But after a few years in that role, I saw an opportunity to go over to the purest form of what I thought my passion and my purpose was, and that was go over and focus on how do you grow people. So that's how I got here. I also came to learn that it doesn't matter what people pay you. Making any amount of money to be miserable is not a life worth living.
Amen, brother.
All right.
I love it. Now, before Jackson, you had a startup of your own.
Mm-hmm.
It was I Run, You Run. So talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that's also going to bleed into our topic today of habits. I mean, when I say
Absolutely.
habit guru, I'm dead serious. You did a lot of work, research, building around this space to try and help people get better at this. So talk to us a little bit about that journey. I think that'll be a nice pivot into our topic.
Sure. Yeah, a good friend of mine who's the founder of I Run, You Run, his name is Mark Newton. He lives here in Atlanta. And he had told me for many years that I knew him that someday I got to show you this thing, this little thing I have on the side, this thing I'm building. And I didn't know it was a physical thing, a software thing. Well, it turns out it was a software thing. And his personal story was in trying to launch a business. He nearly crashed a company. On his worst day, he said he came back to his office. He'd heard no just one too many times. He slammed the door. He sat down at his desk, and he was just ready to quit. And he's a person of tremendous faith, and he put his head down. He said, God, if you don't want me to do this anymore, today's your day. I'm done. If you do, then I need you to tell me what to do, because I have not figured it out. And he said in the very next instant, he got the answer. And as hard as he'd been working, he said it was suddenly crystal clear. I was supposed to do three things. I was supposed to take my business plan, put it in the trash. I was supposed to write down what are the 5 or 6 most important things I need to do each and every week to be successful. And then I need to prioritize and do those things. So he at that time, he just built a little spreadsheet. He put 6 things in it. He gamified it. He weighted them each out of 100 points. And then he tracked how many times he did those 6 things. His goal was to get 100 points a week. And after a couple months, he realized he was averaging in the 30s. He was very busy. He was working a lot of hours, but he wasn't doing the 6 most important things. And once he moved that score into the 90s and he kept it there, his business took off. However, he was so embarrassed about doing this that he didn't share it with anybody for years. And when he finally did, he started finding everyone he shared this with identified with it. They were so busy, but they weren't doing the things that mattered most. And so 7 years later, we're sitting down having coffee, and he shows it to me. And it was awesome. It was this little personal dashboard. I said, what do you call it? He said, I Run, You Run. And it was something else he got back at that day, 7 years prior, was a particular verse. He didn't know the verse. It was out of 2 Samuel. He just wrote it down. He looked it up, and it was about David. And he started to go learn everything of stories about King David and David's exploits and everything. But he said the thing that stood out to him the most was when David was a teenager, he charged a 9 foot tall giant. I can't remember how tall Goliath was. Goliath was a big guy. And he ran at him. And he said, that's what I've learned is you got to get really intentional on the things that matter. You have to run at them. You have to charge them. You can't sneak up on the things that matter. And he also learned it's really hard. If you do it with someone else, you're more likely to stick with it. And so this little accountability app was about, I'm going to run at the things that matter at me. You run at the things that matter to you. If we do it together, we may both win. And I was hooked. I loved it from the moment I saw it and dived in. And so what we learned over the course of the next several years was, first of all, people know a lot about goal setting and project planning and doing to-do lists.
Yeah.
Nobody teaches them how to create habits, and that's what we were really doing. Those 5 or 6 most important things, those are the habits. Those are the should-dos. And we also learned people are pretty terrible at consistently doing anything.
Oh, wow. I got goosebumps. And to that point about goals versus habits, this is a great bridge into our topic today. How would you define the difference? So if someone's listening to this and they say, I don't know, I mean, habit, a goal,
Yeah.
Is it just behaviors?
Goals are great. So we're not anti-goal. I'm not anti-goal. I have goals. I love goals. But the idea that unfortunately is most people think of goals as once and done. Cross it off the list. So it's a glorified to-do.
Yeah, it's kind of like a destination. Like, I'm going to go run a marathon. It's a goal, do it, done.
Exactly. What do you do at the end of a marathon?
Rest.
Stop.
Drink beer. I don't know. Like you're done. It's over.
It's a great beer. But you don't keep running.
No.
That's the difference. So goals are typically, they produce a destination mindset. However, we've got one destination. Most of us aren't there yet. So we said, okay, we got to change how we think about goals. Let's think about goals as milestones and take a bigger look at the journey. So where is it that you're trying to get to? Your goals, if you have them, that's fine. They can be the milestones that tell you you're making progress. But what you really need to do is keep going. And so that's what habits are. Habits are about what do you need to continue doing. And so most, again, organizations, high school students, we're all taught, how do we get things done? Nobody teaches us, how do you keep things going?
Yeah. All right. So on that topic, already I know we're going to have another show. This is one show is not going to do this justice. When we chatted about this show, you mentioned that there was a number of factors that can help people kind of in a noisy world.
Yeah.
How many are there, and how many do you want to try and take on today?
So we found 5.
Okay.
I would not take on more than 2. And it's even tough to decide on the 2, but I may allude to, I'll mention all 5. How's that?
So
and we'll dive in
you
on
love
a
that
couple.
they're like your children. You love them all.
I can't leave one out. But some are more self-evident. Like clarity. You know, we studied.
Ooh, I love clarity.
Everybody does. It just somehow it makes you feel more confident when you get clear on exactly not just what we're trying to accomplish, but how do I get there? What am I supposed to do? When we say we found that very few people could sustain any kind of behaviors, I mean, it was like next to none. So about 1% of people just need to be taught what to do, and then they can continue doing it. The 99 get off track.
Why? Why do we do that?
That is a topic for another day.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's deep. It's in our
So
wiring.
many teasers.
Well,
So many. Travis, so many teasers.
you often hear people don't like change. The data will show they don't like to do the same thing either. We like to do what we want to do when we want to do it. And I think that's how we're wired. But ultimately, getting it, you know, those 5 factors, they were clarity, rhythm, accountability, reinforcement, and leadership.
Clarity, rhythm, accountability, reinforcement, and relationship?
Leadership.
Leadership.
Put it there. That's pretty good. That's a great recall.
Okay.
I think there's one key discovery. It was about a year and a half in. We were entirely focused on sales and leadership behaviors because we're working with companies and we're thinking we've got to show that we actually deliver results. And yet when we asked leaders, what are the 5 or 6 most important things you need to do to be your best leader, your best self? About a third of the things that they said were personal. In some cases, deeply personal. So ultimately, I'll tell you the punchline. If there's one thing you could do to move the needle in the performance of your company or your life, it's sleep more. Get more sleep. How many leaders are tracking the cumulative hours of sleep had in their company? None.
Oh, that's a cool metric. I've never, ever heard of that. Anyone ever tracking that. The cumulative hours of sleep. How funny.
Well, average hours per sleep per night is probably the right number.
Yep.
But it was so interesting. Once we discovered that personal habits power professional performance, and that took us about 2 years to finally have it just beat into our heads. There's a reason leaders keep telling us, I need to work out, I need to sleep, I need to date my wife, I need to have quiet time, I need to read to my kids. Whatever those like really personal things were that recharged them so much. We actually had somebody then send us some research, some Harvard Business Review articles, and this was a coach. And she said, I know why they're telling you that. Here, learn. And we kept saying, no, nobody will buy that. You know, nobody's going to let us come in and track, are your people hydrated? That's another big one.
Wow.
They want to know, did you make your sales calls? Well, anyway, so the rhythm piece has to do with you got to manage both your time and your energy, and personal habits really matter in professional performance.
Yeah, it sounds like it. All right, well, so we're at the break point. So why don't we take a break? When we come back, let's dive in. So I know you laid out those 5 factors. We don't have time to hit all 5. Maybe you can pick your at least 1 or 2 to kind of lead for today. We can dive into those a little bit, and then we'll have to set up another time for another show. This is great. I'm already learning a lot. All right, so stay with us. When we come right back, we'll talk more about those factors and those habits that we can put in place in our lives to not only give us the lives that we want, but also have the professional results that we want. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, this is Brandon. I hope your 2018 is everything you'd hoped it would be. That said, we could all use a tune-up. Go to my site, theworkplacetherapist.com, www.theworkplacetherapist, all one word, .com, for a library of resources for you. You can find past shows, blog posts on navigating workplace dysfunction, and even my TED Talk on the contagiousness of emotions in the workplace. And that's not all. There are the Workplace Happiness Workbooks to help you find happiness in your job, and even a tab to Ask the Therapist, where you can ask me anything on your mind. We all need a tune-up once in a while. Get yours today. Welcome back to the Brandon Smith Show. Of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and we are talking today about habits. And I've got my awesome friend and guest and habit guru. That's your new title, Travis. Travis Dommert. And if you remember right before break, we were talking about habits, and Travis took me down a path I was not expecting, where we went down this idea that it was really the personal habits, which seem to have such a big impact in our life. Things like sleep, things like spending time with our people close to us, and exercise and working out to really balance energy. I wasn't expecting us to go down that path. Now, before we went down that path, you outlined 5 key factors. And I know today we don't have time to hit all 5. Are there any 1 or 2 you want to start with today that would help get us down the path of building better habits?
Absolutely. What I'm thinking is just touching on a couple that were, I think, the most surprising to us. And the first one's reinforcement. It shouldn't be surprising that people need reinforcement, especially at work, but I would say in life also. What I was surprised by was how much reinforcement they need and how we grossly underestimate that as leaders. So we were trying to figure out, initially with our software, how much do we need to nudge people? Whether that's sending them reminders, timers, features in the system that would say, hey, you got to do your thing, whatever it is. And so, whatever, we set it up and we gave them the option. You can get a daily reminder, a midweek reminder, an end of week reminder. And, then what we learned is after 3 to 6 weeks, depends on the people, but we can predictably say within 2 months, you can ignore those reminders. If they're scheduled and it's just automated, it's an email, it just finally fades into the background. I don't even notice it.
So you say you can ignore the reminders, or you would ignore the reminders?
You shouldn't, but you will.
Okay, okay, good.
So you won't even notice that email anymore. You'll just delete it as soon as it comes in. You might even finally hit spam, like stop reminding me that I'm supposed to do what I'm supposed to do. It doesn't work. We were working with a group of Army Rangers that were teaching resiliency training to some eBay executives, and they had us come along to provide a reinforcement component. And so they said, great, your tool is going to help everybody continue to do what we've taught them. Well, our tool would continue to measure whether they did the things or not. But what we were learning, again, is automated solutions have a tendency to fall into the background pretty quickly. So we did something different with these folks at eBay. We said, you need to get together, look eyeball to eyeball, and talk to each other. We just weren't sure how often. And so, again, interviewing people that knew this space, I was speaking to a woman who was in a PhD program. She's an expert in sports and sports psychology. She was a former national gymnast and diver. And I said, you're an expert on coaching and reinforcement. How often do we need to reinforce people? And she said, I'm just not a good person to ask. I thought, I can't think of a better person
Why
to
did
ask.
she say that?
She said, I am not a diva athlete. I am extraordinarily self-motivated. So I can tell you what I think most people need, but I think it would be different for me. And I said, well, tell me about you, first of all. How often do you think you need reinforcement? And she said, well, I don't know. Once a day.
Wow.
I said,
wow. I
Are
would
you
not
joking?
have expected that based on the way she set that up.
Exactly. She said, most of the sort of quote unquote diva athletes, like they need the reinforcement every 15 minutes. It's a constant perpetual cycle. You did this right. You missed over here. You can keep doing it. Great job. And she said, for me, I just needed to be sat down and talked to once a day. And I asked her, have you ever worked in corporate America? There are people that go years without any feedback. And she said, that is criminal.
I would agree with that. That's fantastic. Criminal.
So we started telling our clients, like, okay, leaders, if you're trying to drive behavior change and specifically intentional behaviors in your team, you're going to need to reinforce this every week. It'd be better if you did it every day, but let's just say every week. And that was a huge hurdle. And so this team at eBay got together, and we realized there's tremendous power when someone says your name, and they look you in the eyeballs, and they say, Brandon, you did this right this week, and it looks like over here you're hurting. How can I help you? No shame. But we realized eyeballs and the name. It was the first team we ever had that got stronger every week.
Okay, so I'm hearing two big things in this. There's a lot more, but two things resonated with me in particular. One was real accountability has to be a relational thing, not just a technology thing.
Right.
It's another person.
Maybe we could use some AI to make it feel like personal if you had to do technology, but boy, if it's personal, it's exponentially more powerful.
And the second thing I'm hearing in this from a managerial standpoint is don't cancel your one-on-ones.
Right.
I mean, that stuff really matters.
It really matters.
That really matters. And people really need it and they want it, and it's important to maintain, not only for them to feel appreciated, but also help them maintain momentum, progress, and provide that reinforcement.
Yeah. And you'll have people say, that's not my style. That's too much for me. I'm too busy. All of those excuses are about them. If they will say, what does your person need? Forget yourself.
Yeah.
They need to hear their name. They need to have someone look at them, and then someone expresses encouragement, concern, and reinforcement. And it's got to happen a lot more than you think.
Yeah, and you've said it a couple times, and I would be remiss if I didn't also reinforce this. You said, say their name. Actually, say their name. Look them in the eye. There's something about our name.
It's powerful.
That when we hear it, there's something personal and real and kind of touches our soul.
Right.
I think that's an important point.
Yep. So anyway, the other four, boy, I'm already kind of hitting on the leaders. Leadership is one of the five. And what we mean there is two things. One is that the leader needs to go first. If we're driving behavior change, the leader's behaviors need to change first. If you're talking about the fact that personal habits power professional performance, the coach can't be, I hate to say it, but the coach can't be the slob, can't be the laggard. The coach has got to be on the field. And so at work, if we're saying, sleep matters, hydration matters, fitness matters, human relationships matter, but that person stays out all night, has a terrible relationship at home, has broken relationships in the workplace, they're not credible. So leaders do have to go first. I think they've got to set an example, and they do. The truth is they set the example. It's just whether or not they set the example they want. And then the other part is people need to lead themselves. And so we had cases where we'd had tremendous leaders who wanted more than anything for their people to be successful and high achieving and whole. And they said, I just don't understand. I can't make them do it. And they're right. They won't keep doing it if you don't, but they also have to do it for their own reasons. And so people have to lead themselves, and that led to some other big discoveries. Ultimately, it was around, you've got to help people, you got to have people identify their purpose and their identity, and it can't be yours. And most people, again, they don't do that. It doesn't take that long, but if you said, how many of you have a clear purpose for your life? You might be batting like 1% or less.
Yeah. Okay, I've got to dive into this. So if just looking at it on the surface, it's almost like you just gave two different answers, but I know they're not. So you said to drive, I'm summarizing,
sure,
paraphrasing, probably in a horrible way. So let's see if I get this right. To drive change, we got a group of people, we want them to change. The leader has to go first. That models the behavior, sets the culture, sets the tone. That's how you're going to get people to change. Or you can't make people change. They've got to want it for themselves too.
Yes.
Maybe this is an unfair question, but I love unfair questions. What's the percentage breakdown of that? If we're mixing that recipe, if you had just the leader, how much will that impact the ability for the group to change? Or if you didn't have that and just the individual?
Well, it's funny. Before we started the show, we were talking a little bit about balance and the whole idea of work-life balance. And I mentioned before the show that a lot of people view those as opposite sides of the equation, and they offset. And I said, we really learned to put them on the same side of the equation and put an X between them, like one times the other equals results. And I think the same thing is true here. If the leader and their leadership goes to zero, you get zero. If the individual contributors' self-leadership goes to zero, you get zero. You need them both, and they multiply. So I could say it's 50-50, but the truth is, if either component goes to zero, you get no sustained results. So the leader must do it, and the individual, the associate, must want to do it and develop a reason for why they're going to do it. It just isn't an either or. And the more you can optimize both of those, you get exponentially greater results.
Yeah, and then one more thought that I had in my head, and we're already moving towards close. I can't believe it, Travis. You're going to have to come back. We have to twist your arm. We have to find a way to create some habits to get you here more regularly.
It'd be fun.
I would be remiss also if I didn't attend to the fact that when you talk about modeling, we often talk about in the workplace, but I think that same idea of leadership applies at home too. So you can't say to your kids, hey, don't smoke, and then you're smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
Right. Don't use that language.
And then
don't watch that show.
And if you do the same thing, if you're doing what you're saying don't do, they're going to follow they're going to model after your behaviors more than what you say.
Right.
So you have to lead first.
Not talk.
I had a client yesterday I was working with, is in a law firm. He's got a one particular client that causes him all his anxiety. So we talked about changing that relationship. This client brings in a lot of revenue for them. And he's a partner in a law firm, and so runs this whole group. And he said, if I was to be really honest, he said, I'm never going to let go of this client. I'm just going to kind of tolerate their abusiveness. And I said, okay, well, let's talk about a relationship reset on how you change that. And while that's important for you, I want to attend to the fact you're also modeling for your team and your associates how to operate when a client is abusive. You're modeling for them to take it. Oh, by the way, and you're also modeling for your kids that when you're in a relationship and someone's abusive, you just have to take it. You're modeling for them. He got quiet when I said that. He was really thinking. It was no longer just about him.
Right.
He was setting the tone for all those other ecosystems that he's leading, which is exactly what you're talking about. So it made me think about that story. So I can't believe it. We're already nearing the end here. So I ask every guest this question. If you could think of one life hack for us, something that we could do personally or professionally to help make our lives healthier, more free from dysfunction, what is it?
Well, I think we've actually talked about it. If I was going to pick one habit, and so that first thing would be look at your habits. Look at the things you consistently do. If I could pick one for you, I would say get 8, not 6, not 5, 8 hours of sleep. When you start waking up without the alarm, with new ideas, with energy, and your feet hit the floor, and you're actually waking up thinking, let me at it, everything changes. And it will change your life, it'll change your relationships, it will change your work, it'll change your creativity. Sleep is a fuel. And if you can't sleep. Then start peeling the onion. Why? Is it simply because I don't get to bed on time, or is it because I'm worrying? Is it a belief and faith thing? Is it a logistics thing? Is it that I'm too worked up and I need to exercise more? Is it that I'm not happy with myself? You just keep digging away. But ultimately, I think the metric is, are you getting those restful hours of sleep?
I'm going to go take a nap, folks. Taking a nap right after the show. Right after the show. So people want to learn more about you. Where can they go?
I'd say just something like LinkedIn. I'm there. irunyouRun.com is a site we've kept up and running, even though we're not really running that business. Probably have 100 articles there of various things that we learned along the journey. And so that's a good place to learn some stuff. And then I would say, if you're a talented leader who really wants to set a great example and live out your passion, then come find us at Jackson Healthcare. We'd like to hire you.
Nice. Amen, brother. You're a gift. You're a gift, man. You're a gift.
Buddy.
So glad to have you on. He's coming back, folks. We're making that a habit. So thank you for listening and watching today, and I hope this was valuable to you. I know it was definitely valuable to me. Follow us every week as we continue the fight against dysfunction. Of course, you can follow us and listen to the show, watch the show on Facebook, facebook.com/Brandon Smith WPT for a workplace therapist. Twitter @the WP Therapist. Of course, download us on iTunes. If you're not doing that, you should. New show every Sunday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And until our next show, have a great week and an awesome life.